Hey, welcome everybody to Let's Talk About You with Shannon Q, number 9 edition. Yeah, we're already up to number 9. Can you believe that? Seems like this yesterday we started these, but man, we're working on a dozen here. So tonight we got Justin Derby from TTOR, which I forget what that stands for. Please forgive me, but he could explain it. But this was something that kind of Shannon had asked me to actually arrange. So this is unlike most of the Let's Talks we've had before. She does know a little bit about this person, so just kind of laying the cards on the table. But I still think there's a lot to learn about each other. So I'm just going to turn this right over to Shannon. And she's been waiting for this for quite some time. So look at that smile on her face. She has great expectations here, Justin. So don't let her down. Don't disappoint her. And it's all yours.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. So, as Steve said, full disclosure, I'm familiar with Justin, which is a new one for me. This is the first Let's Talk I've had that I'm familiar with the person that I'm going to be talking to. So the reason I know who Justin is was because I'm part of the Paulogia YouTube channel. And Justin did, I believe it's 2 now, if I'm not corrected, videos about Paulogia specifically and focusing on Paul. So I went over to Justin's channel after that to try to have a dialogue with him, but it was difficult because we weren't on the same sort of social media platforms in order to be able to interact, and it's difficult in the YouTube section. So the YouTube comment section. So Justin, I'm really glad that you were willing to come here and have a chat with me. Thank you.
Not a problem.
So did you want to tell everybody a little bit about your channel and who you are and kind of explain, what you're all about and what your channel is about before we start going?
Sure, why not? TTOR is my YouTube channel name. It's also the channel name on all the alt tech that I use. It's an acronym for Truth, the Objective Reality, which was actually a blog that I started on blogspot.com in September of 2013. In May of 2015, I decided to make a YouTube channel to supplement the blog, which I was writing about 1 or 2 posts a month on the blog. But then YouTube basically overtook the blog, and now I make about 10 to 15 videos a month. And my blog has gone from being a source of information to being primarily just a website where you can find links to various things. And so I'm pretty much a full-time video content creator between YouTube, BitChute, PewTube, and now the vlogs.
Cool. So do you want to tell anybody a little bit about what your content is about, or would you prefer to just kind of start having a discussion and they can probably discover from there?
Oh, sure, I can do that. I'm a self-taught Christian apologist, meaning that I did not go to seminary or Bible college or some Christian university and have to take all these classes to get these pieces of paper to say I can do this. I basically self-taught myself using books and the internet and Google. And my primary topics on my channel are young earth creationism, old earth creationism, atheism, evolution, King James onlyism, and Bible topics in general. And sometimes me and my ministry partner, John Chambers, we both have done videos on Islam.
I'm very sorry to interrupt, but we have somebody in here, and I want to give the link out to you two.
Oh, I didn't give it to anybody.
Oh, no one can watch?
They could watch, but this is the internal link to join. I think you gave the wrong link out.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Did you give it to them in private, or did you make it public?
I didn't make it public. I just gave it to 2 people.
All right. Well, he can hang out in here. If he wants to. He can talk in the group chat. Okay.
If he interrupts, I'll be very.
Well, I'm not going to show him. But he can sit and listen in. The outside feed can't see him. But I get nervous when I see somebody pop in that when I want to give a link to 2 people.
I've run podcasts myself, and that's the only way I know how to do it. So yeah, I'm sorry.
No problem. Okay, so you're a self-taught apologist. We'll just keep going. So I'm sure he'll be respectful and polite. He's a friend of yours.
Yeah.
So the reason I kind of discovered you, and you're a young earth creationist, obviously, based on my viewings of your videos. Actually, the first question I have has nothing to do with that. The first question I have is there's always varying types of duct tape, and there are always different types of duct tape on the back and on your shelf. And I'm constantly wondering, what's all the duct tape about? Is that the same shelf, just a different angle?
Yeah, it's the same shelf. It's a corner of my room. The duct tape, if you're talking about the black one, that was used for a Batman costume I have sitting in storage.
That's awesome. I used to make like those wallets, like we had different colored duct tapes, like back in high school. I used to make like different wallets and stuff. So that's why I was curious. So anyway, you were a young earth creationist,
Yes.
and you kind of took objection to Paulogia specifically. You did a video called Paulogia Exposed. And, as you know, I'm a part of that channel. I'm not the face of it. Paul is. So, and you did 2 videos on it. So I guess I'm just kind of curious to start off exactly what your point of contention was.
I was actually asked to do the first one. I had no real interest in covering Paulogia at all.
Okay.
I thought if I took some fan requests now and then, it might create some better, what's the word I'm thinking of? Engagement with my fans.
Yeah. No,
so I watched his intro video just to see, what would he have to say about his backstory. And that's what I made the video about, was my response to his backstory.
Okay.
I guess the main point of contention I would have with the video that a lot of people didn't like me talking about was the fact that he admitted in the video that for his entire Christian life, before he started getting into this whole believing in an evolution in billions of years and then looking up creationism apologetics, before he ever did any of that, he admitted in the video that he had been a Christian for many years and he never bothered to study things for himself because he thought, well, I have these authority figures. They're so well studied on the subject. There's really no point in studying anything for myself because they've done that work for me. They must know what they're talking about. And that's something I have a contention with anybody who claims to be a former Christian, or even if they're a Christian today, but they still have that kind of attitude. I have a real problem with that, because if that's the attitude you have in life, you can be influenced by whatever sounds good to your ear. And what sounds good to your ear is susceptible to change over time. It's just not a very stable way of going through life, in my opinion.
Okay, those are fair opinions. I think perhaps there was maybe a miscommunication with his video, or misunderstanding in his video, because I can tell you for a fact that Paul actually went to Bible college. He was a Bible quizzing coach, and he actually has a sizable portion of the New Testament memorized. I think what he really meant, that he took on authority, was that he didn't have to trust science.
He didn't communicate that very well in his video, if that's what he meant.
Right. So that may be fair. And you just watched his opening video, which I believe was the first one.
Yeah, the very first one he uploaded, which was how Ken Ham made him an atheist, even though he never really explained that in the video.
Okay. Well, I can give you a little bit of a background on that, but then we'll move past Paul, because I have some other questions for you that don't have anything to do with Paul. So the Ken Ham made me an atheist thing was he was starting to write a graphic novel. He was a graphic novelist after he finished working for George Lucas. And when he was writing the graphic novel, it had dinosaurs were part of the premise. It was essentially an alternate universe where the dinosaurs hadn't died. And he was looking into the science for the first time. He'd studied the Bible extensively, but because of the line of work that he was in, he was a computer programmer. And then he worked with George Lucas, working on his website for Lucasfilms, and ran Lucasfilm Online for a really long time, and was a graphic novelist. So he really didn't have to study biology or paleontology, or any of the fields that were affiliated with the age of the Earth. He started to look into how old dinosaurs were, just because he kind of wanted the secular point of reference, because he was marketing his book. And when he looked into it, he saw the age that most of the scientific community gave to the dinosaurs. And then he investigated it a little bit more and was looking for ways to reaffirm his faith. So he turned to what he thought the best books were, and the best apologetics, and the best explanations for why the secular science was wrong. So he turned to Ken Ham, and he turned to Answers in Genesis, because he thought that their books were the best. They were the utmost. They were held as the pillar for, apologetics in this particular area, to help explain why the science was wrong. And when he turned to those books, he found them lacking. So that started to kind of give him the dissonance that led him along the path. So that's essentially how Ken Ham made him an atheist by not being a good apologist, essentially, and not having the answers that he needed in the time that he really wanted his faith to be reaffirmed. And Ken Ham wasn't capable of doing that because, well, to my opinion, it's not possible because I'm an atheist, obviously. But that would be a little bit more. Does that help elaborate a little more, or was that part of your initial understanding coming in to having a chat with me?
Not really, because in the video he talked about experiencing cognitive dissonance before he started picking up the AIG Ken Ham books and doing all that work.
Right, that's why he did it.
You don't experience cognitive dissonance if you didn't actually believe the billions of years he was using in his graphic novel. Because if I was doing that, I wouldn't have experienced any cognitive dissonance. I would have known, okay, I'm going with billions of years for a graphic novel. I don't actually believe any of it. This is purely for the story plot.
Right.
There would have been no cognitive dissonance on my part. The fact that he explained having that and gave a video clip explaining what cognitive dissonance was showed me that he actually believed the billions of years before he ever picked up the AIG Ken Ham books. And that's the way his video lays it out. If it's a chronological sequence, that's the impression I got from it. Now, if you're telling me that it's not chronological or that he actually knew a lot of these things before he ever had this whole issue come up, he didn't communicate that very well in his video.
Okay, so I'll lay out a timeline in a little more of a concise manner, perhaps then. So he 100% wholeheartedly believed it. Had to look up the science, the paleontological science on dinosaurs, or felt obligated to, in order to get the secular viewpoint to market the book. Came across some science that made him question things and made him say, oh, you know, some of this makes sense. If it makes sense, there must be a reason within my theological perspective that would allow for it. So I feel dissonant because this is what I truly, truly believe. I truly, truly believe in the 6,000-year-old Earth. That this is a contradiction to that. So that's what dissonance is, you know, this is a contradiction to that. I'm feeling a little bit like maybe this could be wrong, but I want to prove that it's right. And therefore he turned to Ken Ham to prove that it was right.
He also believed what he was being told about the science that was giving him this confliction in the first place, right?
Not what he was being told about it, what he was reading himself. So yeah, we can move off.
He believed what he was reading. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm clarifying.
Right, because it made logical sense. Right. Okay. So we can move off of Paul. So let's talk a little bit about you. So what were you raised in? Were you raised in a Christian background, or is this something that you came to later in life?
Yes, I have grown up in a Christian home and family, but as far as apologetics, creationism, learned none of that from them, none of that from the churches I've attended, or even the 1 year I spent at Corbin University, which is a Christian college here in Oregon. I didn't learn creationism or apologetics from anybody. I basically stumbled across it myself in the later stages of my college life. And then shortly after my college life and my early adulthood, I really started studying it deeper for myself since I didn't have school to take up so much of my time outside of work. So I go ahead.
I was just going to say, what made you turn? So you were raised religious, but not necessarily as, you know, a biblical literalist or a creationist.
I had older creationist beliefs, but I wasn't an apologist who studied things. I believed that the world and universe could be billions of years old without contradicting whatever information the Bible had in it, which is an approach, unfortunately, that most Christians have towards the Bible. And I know from my personal experience of being an older creationist, as far as my beliefs go, that they don't come to that position from knowing the Bible. Right. I had to figure that out the hard way.
Okay. So you started to become more into the Bible, and that led you to a more literalist viewpoint later in your life?
Even when I was an older creationist, I had a very high view of the Bible, meaning that I actually believed and practiced that if the Bible's truly the ultimate authority in my life as far as beliefs and understanding of the world, then you have to go with what it says.
Right.
So as soon as I was able to see the passages in the Bible, like the genealogies and time spans that the Bible gives that add up to 6,000 years, and as soon as I saw the passages in the Old and New Testament that make no sense at all unless the 6,000-year timeline is true, that's when I became a young earth creationist. Well, that and after I saw how old earth creationists treated the Bible, people like Hugh Ross and Frank Turek and William Lane Craig, Norman Geisler, and a lot of the leading old earth creationist apologists, when I saw how they treated the Bible after understanding how the Bible taught a 6,000-year-old earth and universe, that's when I made the change to being a young earth creationist. I'm not wedded to scientific models like a lot of young earth creationists are. I'm a Bible person.
Okay. So you don't really, so you wouldn't really go through any of the answers in Genesis sort of, research that they do to try to scientifically reinforce the young earth model through. So you're more so just the Bible says so.
I did look at
AI. That's it.
Yeah, I did look at AIG materials when I first became a young earth creationist and right before, because the only reason I even found out that it was a position was because of the first Bill Nye Ken Ham debate.
Oh,
that's what caused me to look it up. Yeah, so that's what caused me to even look it up in the first place.
Oh, wow.
And so I did all the research, and I've seen plenty of materials on AIG, but a lot of people seem to think that Answers in Genesis represents all young earth creationists.
No, it doesn't at all.
And I'm here to say to anyone who thinks that that's not true. As a matter of fact, I haven't really touched an AIG source probably in 3 years.
Okay.
Maybe 2.5 years. AIG really doesn't play a role in my life as a young earth creationist.
So what outside of the Bible do you see as affirmation that the earth is young?
Outside of the Bible.
Right.
Well, I would say that the decay rate of Earth's magnetic field is one of the things that makes a lot of sense to me. Because mathematically speaking, if uniformitarianism is true and the decay rate of Earth's magnetic field has always been what it is now, then about 10,000 to 100,000 years ago, the Earth's magnetic field would become so strong that it would have ripped the planet's core out of the mantle and we would have self-destructed like Krypton. And that makes the billions of years timeline for the Earth complete nonsense, because you can't have evolution occurring over millions and billions of years on Earth if 10,000 to 100,000 years ago there was no Earth to evolve on. And I've never seen an evolutionist actually respond to that in a coherent manner. As a matter of fact, I don't usually see a response to it at all. Most of the time over the years that I've talked to evolutionists and atheists and I've brought that up, it tends to get swept under the rug by the people I'm talking with, and they tend to jump to other topics.
Okay. Well, to be fair, I'm not going to sweep that under the rug. I would be interested to see somebody who's qualified in the field to address that argument with you. I'm not, and I'm not one of the people that's going to pretend to be. I don't know anything about the Earth's magnetic field. So that's not something that I could address specifically with you.
It's been a while since I looked at that information myself, so I too would have to go back and look at where I found it and look at the sources and all of that. But it's not a very important thing to me in my hierarchy of things to address and how I approach things. But that is something I've seen that has never been adequately answered by any evolutionist I've talked with thus far.
If it could be, it's interesting that you say evolutionist. It's a term I only ever really hear young earth creationists use. And my best friend, as a matter of fact, she's a PhD biologist. So she subscribes to evolution, but she wouldn't describe herself as an evolutionist, nor would I would give myself that moniker. Evolution is something I believe in, obviously.
I believe it's a term to distinguish atheists from theistic evolutionists.
Okay.
Because those are people who are basically evolutionists, but they say God did it.
Right, but
People
they
like Barry
believe in the
Marshall.
same science, though. So what's the distinction between an evolutionist and a theistic evolutionist aside from a belief in God?
When people say evolutionist, I think what they mean is atheistic evolutionist, and I've heard people use that term too. So they're kind of interchangeable in the younger creationist community: atheistic evolutionist and evolutionist.
Oh, okay. It's interesting to know the nomenclature for me, because I hear the term bandied about quite a bit, and evolutionist in the secular community isn't a term that you hear very often, except for when it's expressed, in description of us. So it's okay. It's interesting to hear. So when you say theistic evolutionists, you mean the biologos type people?
Biologos, Perry Marshall, reasons to, well, I don't know if reasons to believe is or not. I think they are, but it's hard telling sometimes.
Okay.
But folks like that.
I have so many questions for you. So outside of the Bible, the only evidence that you've attested to seeing or being exposed to is the magnetic field of the earth, the decay rate of the magnetic field of the earth. Is there anything that could be presented to you from a scientific perspective or logical perspective that would in any way sway you, or is essential, or would you dismiss anything that contradicted the Bible?
Well, my answer to that is actually kind of long-winded, because
I'll take it. You can do it. Go ahead.
Well, to be honest, I guess to use the word, the evolution paradigm, the general paradigm, the order of events that it lays out as the worldview, I just can't buy. Because you're talking about going from simple to more complex forms of life over the course of billions of years through natural selection and random chance mutations. And this is supposed to lead into everything, even though, one, the opposite is a scientific law called the law of entropy. The law of entropy is the opposite of evolution, because it says when things are left to itself over time with no intelligent intervention whatsoever, everything naturally deteriorates, wears down, falls into disorder. Whereas evolution teaches that if you leave everything to itself with no intelligent intervention involved, it will go the opposite curve. It will just get bigger, better, more complex, and more awesome. And so there's a confliction there between that law of science and the evolution paradigm. But my main problem with the evolution paradigm is, according to the paradigm itself, nobody has ever seen any of its events happen historically. No one living today has ever seen anything happen, but no one living in the past, no matter how far back you want to go, according to the historical timeline that evolution lays out, has ever seen any of it happen. It all happened before anyone with the ability to make a record of what they see and observe came around. So the only way we could actually believe that any of it happened today is we would have to believe what the person sitting in the authority position in academia and in the scientific community tells us. That's the only way someone today could believe that it's true. They can't go out and look at the field experiment or look at the historical document where they see one kind or family turn into another kind family. They can't look up a field study or a historical document that says, yeah, at this time and in this place, we saw stellar evolution or we saw chemical evolution. There's no observational things we can just go walk to in nature and see macroevolution and all that stuff beyond microevolution happen.
Okay.
And with young Earth creationism, it's a little different, because at least you have a account of creation that purports to have been written by the creator himself, someone who was there at the beginning. And the way it reads and the way that the footnote right after the creation account talks is that the creator himself wrote the account. So you have an eyewitness account from the one person who was there at the beginning, who basically was recording what he did. And then throughout the Bible, you have other people affirming what the creation account teaches. And of course, the God-man himself, Jesus of Nazareth, comes in the 1st century and teaches that male and female were created at the beginning of creation, which is a statement that has to be wrong unless the 6,000-year timeline is true and the creation account of God speaking everything into existence over 6 ordinary days 6,000 years ago is true. So that's how a creationist comes to that position. It's actually something that's implicitly taught by
because
Jesus.
they're logical and that's a literal interpretation.
And that's what Jesus taught implicitly through his teaching on divorce.
Okay.
And that's something that, frankly, I don't think creationists emphasize enough today, is what Jesus said. He's almost kind of a footnote when they go about proving creationism. They tend to stick to their scientific models.
Okay.
And they're focused on their scientific models, too, and the field of science in general. And they don't stress enough, at least to their own community, about Jesus and what he taught and said. Because after all, most young earth creationists, including myself, we consider ourselves to be followers of Jesus of Nazareth. Well, if we don't emphasize what he taught, then what good is it to call ourselves Jesus followers? And so the case for the historical Jesus is probably a lot stronger than the case for young earth creationism, because his life happened much more recently, and there's more evidence to his life. And the further back you go, it's harder to find evidence, because evidence, frankly, just doesn't last that long. Especially
entropy and all.
Yeah, unfortunately, entropy affects everything. So, like historical documents of the past, we probably don't even have today, because they couldn't have lasted this long due to whatever conditions they were in. So,
right. Okay. Are you frozen? There you are. You froze for a second for me. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I thought you were frozen.
I don't have the best connection here.
That's okay. All right. That's a fantastic response. I get all of that response. And that response has elicited a lot of questions for me. So the first question that I have for you is, you spoke regarding, the difference between, I guess, what you would perceive as microevolution and macroevolution. And I don't want to stick on evolution for too long, because I actually have some theological questions for you, if that's okay. Things that have always bothered me that I think that maybe you may be able to help me with. Okay. So what you said that we haven't seen it. We've obviously seen what you would perceive as microevolution. And in order to be able to believe the Noah's Ark, I hate to say story in this context because I don't want to seem disrespectful to you, but in order to believe the Noah's Ark account in the Bible, you would have to believe, obviously, for him to fit, you would have to believe in the kinds, right? And that
families.
So that's what you, when it comes, to kingdom, violent, okay. So you see those as the family in the okay.
Well, I've seen evolutionists call kinds families, like that Ray Comfort documentary.
You're the first young earth creationist that has ever even attempted to give me a definition of a kind, so I appreciate that.
I forgot who the evolutionist was, but in that Ray Comfort 2013 documentary, Evolution versus God, I forget what the professor was, but the professor told Ray Comfort that when you're talking about kinds, you're referring to families. So that's how I've understood it, and I haven't seen a reason to reject what he said.
Sure. Okay. So you believe that there's been diversification since then, obviously. I mean, you to give a really common example, I mean, you can go from a domestic house cat and all the varieties of house cat all the way up to, lion and panther. That's a wide variety of diversification from one initial kind, or the family level of the classification tree of species, right? So in order for that to happen, obviously the degree of change must be able to happen to vary that widely just within that one family. So when does that stop? Is there a halting point where it no longer diversifies? Because at some point, if that can go on infinitely, if that diversification was able to start from a finite point and create the complexity that we see now in 4,000 years, what would that look like in 1,000,000 from now? If that diversification continues, would they all still be cats, or could there potentially be speciation? If those macroevolutions add up, or microevolutions, add up and accumulate, then we would see speciation over time, would we not? If even starting at that 4,000 year point?
Yeah. The problem is that according to every evolutionist I've ever read or studied or seen, is that the process you're describing takes so long to happen, nobody lives long enough to actually see it happen in action.
Well, of course we can't. None of us live billions of years or millions of years, so we can't see the change. It's gradual.
I have to believe it by faith that it happens if I'm going to believe it at all, and I just don't have that much faith.
But you believe by faith that it went from one kind of cat to the wide variety of cats that we see today.
Sure, why not? We see diversity happening today, and so it would make logical sense that the animals on the ark had all the genetic information necessary in them for that diversity to happen.
Right. Okay.
And a lot of that is based on environmental conditions. The Bible itself makes it clear that the world before the flood was a lot different than the world after the flood. That's why you saw the average age of human beings in the genealogies go from over 900 years on average before the flood to way down fairly quickly to the point where one of the Psalms says that in the time of Moses, the average age was 70.
Mm-hmm.
So environmental conditions would be the primary factor for that kind of change.
Right. But that kind of change had to have happened in order for that diversity to exist. So when does it stop? Will cats always be cats?
Well,
a million years from now?
Our entire animal classification system is based on there being strict boundaries that can't be crossed. Otherwise, everything would be a transitional form, and we wouldn't be able to classify animals based on boundaries.
I think that you're right about that. I think to a certain degree, everything is a transitional form, and I think that the classification system that we have as a screen is kind of a capture in time of what everybody is at this point. And that's one of the reasons why that classification system does change, because we see like even that there's a species of finches that has speciated and can no longer interbreed with the other species of finches. And that's also why we see, I believe, I can't remember exactly what they're called. I want to call them circular species, and this is so wrong. The chat's probably losing their mind, but I can't see the chat right now. Ring species. There's ring species where you can see their starting point, and they spread out to the point that each one can interbreed with the step down, but when you get to the top, they can't interbreed with each other, even though you can see a clear starting point of those species. And the thing that gets me when it comes to evolution, even without a really broad or even a really focused understanding of evolution, is that there's clearly a wide diversity within any specific kind. So if there's that wide diversity within any specific kind, and it only started 4,000 years ago, that had to happen, that diversity had to have happened exponentially. So that mutation rate must have gone bananas. Like if we started with one cat kind and there was only 2 of them, and then they bred, and in 4,000 years we have the wide array of felines that we see today, that either that evolution happened so rapidly that we would still see it happen. Right. Yeah. Either it happened so rapidly that we would still be seeing it happen day by day, or it did take millions of years, and evolution is true.
In the creationist paradigm, the animals that were on Noah's Ark during the flood were animals from the pre-flood world, so they obviously had a lot more genetic information available to them inside their bodies that would allow for that variety to spring up later. Even if some of those traits were recessive within themselves, they could be expressed in whatever offspring would come up in the future.
Is that position based on a biblical interpretation, that they would have more genetic information?
Well, God does say in the creation account that he made original kinds. He didn't say species or any kind of equivalent to that term.
Sure.
That's where a lot of evolutionists trip up.
Where does the assertion that they would have had more genetic information come from, or is that simply just an assertion in order to make it make sense?
It's a logical implication that's made based off of seeing the wide variety of information within kinds today.
So
it's a deduction. It's not a biblical teaching.
Okay, it would be more of an induction, I think. Okay.
Or induction, whatever the word. Sometimes I get them confused.
That you're going to find an answer, but okay. All right. I understand your perspective. We're going to differ, obviously. I don't want to focus on evolution too much. I have some other theological questions, if that's okay for you. And if you have any questions for me, now would be a good time. This is a two-way conversation. I don't want to monopolize it.
Well, if I think of some questions, I'll let you know.
I believe that you will. You seem like you're more than willing to assert yourself, Justin. Okay, so I have some questions actually that I've never been really able to pose directly to somebody who's a biblical literalist or a really well thought out theist that I thought that you might be able to help me with. So one of them was actually okay, thanks. So one of them was a question that I actually kind of came up with in general conversation yesterday. Nobody's been able to give a good answer to me yet. And that question is this. So if in order for people to be saved, Jesus had to die, he had to be crucified in order for people to be saved, was everybody who existed up until the point of the crucifixion damned?
Are you including Old Testament believers?
Yeah, because if they could, here's my quandary. Because if Old Testament believers could have been saved, then why was the crucifixion necessary?
Well, the book of Hebrews explains that they were saved on credit, not on. They were saved on what was coming and not what they had done. Actually, we'll pull up the passage for you because I know what passage is relevant to your question.
Okay, yes, please do. Can you understand how that's a quandary, though?
Yes,
okay.
I can understand how that's a quandary. I'm just gonna find it. It is here.
Okay.
Here we are. In Hebrews chapter 11, verses 39 and 40, it says, "These were all commended for their faith," which they listed a bunch of Old Testament figures before that.
Sure.
"These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us being the Christians of after Jesus, would they be made perfect." So they're saved by Jesus just as we are, but they were saved by what Jesus was going to do in the future, not us, where we're saved by what he did in the past.
Okay.
So Old Testament believers who are saved were saved on credit, what was coming, and we're saved by what's happened.
Do you still have that passage open? Would you mind reading it to me straight again, please, just so that I can absorb it?
Hebrews chapter 11, verses 39 and 40 says, and this is in the NIV version, so.
Okay.
"These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect."
Okay. So that passage to you...
that addresses Old Testament believers, yeah.
Right. So isn't that an assertion and an inference to say that us means Christians?
Well, the letter was written to Christians, so.
Was it written in the Old Testament?
The book of Hebrews is in the New Testament. It was written around mid-60s, I think, AD.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's late 60s. They don't know who the author was, according to the NIV study Bible I have. It was either Apollos or Barnabas, who were known Christian leaders in the first century, shortly after Jesus' ascension to heaven.
Okay. So they didn't get what they were Okay. So...
They were promised a Messiah. They were promised, an ancestry and a bloodline that they never lived to see. And Jesus, the Messiah, obviously came a lot later in the first century AD.
Right.
And so they never saw Jesus, but he was the person that they were looking forward to.
So were they able to ascend into heaven before Jesus' crucifixion?
Off the top of my head, I can't exactly tell you a specific Bible answer, but I'm certain that there is one. Unfortunately, since I cover so many different topics on my YouTube channel, keeping everything straight in the file cabinet in my head is a challenge.
Sure, because I appreciate you having a go, because it's still something that I'm having difficulty with. I've had people tell me that they went into purgatory, and that when Jesus was crucified, he ascended into hell and took them out of purgatory, and then took them back and then took them to heaven. And I've been told that essentially that they weren't saved. I mean, these are a lot of the reasons that I came out of my faith, because I was an Anglican. I mean, I'm not sure what denomination you were, but I was very, very devout.
Non-denominational.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But I was very devout. You know, I was the youngest person confirmed in my church, and I was an altar girl. You know, I was very devout. And when I turned to my faith and finally read the Bible for myself, I had sort of the opposite reaction to you. We're opposite sides of the same coin. You know, later in my life, in my 20s, when I really started to read it and study it, I encountered a great deal of questions that nobody was able to answer for me. Like, for example, the passage in Numbers where God essentially aborts a baby. That I had a difficult time with that if I was being told that abortion was wrong, because God was doing it. When God tells people to bash children's heads off of rocks, I had a hard time with that.
I know that passage.
The bashing heads, or the Numbers passage where he says that the test for the unfaithful wife is the Numbers passage.
The bashing of heads sounds like a psalm that I recall. That's regarding the Babylonians.
Might be. I can't remember exactly. It's been a while since I read it cover to cover.
But if that's the one,
like the bear that killed the kids because they made fun of the bald guy, the talking donkey, like a lot of that stuff just confounded me. I couldn't reconcile it with reality or morality from my perspective. Did you have any of those difficulties yourself, and how were you able to reconcile those?
You sure brought up a lot, that's for sure.
As
far as the Elijah or Elisha, whichever one it was, who had the bear, who basically cursed these kids, and a bear or lion came and killed them. A lot of English translations render that as children or kids, but they weren't actually kids. That's apparently a mistranslation.
Does that make it better?
They were much older.
But it's okay to curse people for making fun of you and have them killed by like a bear?
Well, they were more
because they
than
said
just,
you were bald when they laughed at you.
They were more than just teasers and jokesters like that.
How so?
Well, let's see. You said that was in Numbers, right?
No, the abortion passage is in Numbers. It's the test for the unfaithful wife. That one's in Numbers. I think it's Numbers 31 or 21.
Let's see.
The test for the unfaithful wife is definitely in Numbers. And in the NIV, if I remember correctly, in the NIV, you take her to, if you're gone away for a while and you think that your wife has cheated on you, you can take her to the tabernacle, and the priest will take some dirt off the floor and put it in water, and he'll place a curse on it, and he'll get her to drink it. And if she's been unfaithful, then God will place a curse on her, and her womb will miscarry, and her thigh will bleed. And if she has not been unfaithful, then she's allowed to go back out. She's allowed to either keep the baby. She's allowed to keep the baby and go back out and be amongst her people.
Mm-hmm. I recall the passage, just not the reference.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking it up?
I was, but that's going to take too long.
Google will do that for you really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so... when you came across those types of passages, how did you reconcile your, personal morality or your personal sense of reality with those Bible passages so that you could get past it?
Well, the fact of the matter is, if you create something, whether it be a book or an entire fictional story, science fiction, or you create a work of art, the creator has the right to trash his own creation if he wants to.
So you don't believe that he's benevolent?
If he wants to go about dealing with figuring out if someone's been unfaithful or not in that manner, that's his prerogative. But you have to remember...
He's not benevolent, because that's him aborting an innocent child.
You have to remember, though, that you're reading from the Torah, which is an old covenant that's no longer in effect according to the New Testament. The only thing the Torah is useful now, according to Romans and other New Testament passages, is learning about God's nature, his character, and learning about basic sin and morality. As Paul says in Romans 7:7, I think it is, I wouldn't know what sin was if it wasn't for the law, which is a reference to the Torah. It's one of the nicknames of it.
For sure. Okay. So did God really do all those things? Is what happened in the Torah, even if it's no longer relevant, is it an accurate depiction of God and what God did and what God was like? Because Genesis is in the Torah, and so are those genealogies and lineages that you spoke about. So if that's mostly just a law and it's not a representation of God, then and if you don't hold those components as true, then why would you hold the rest of it as true?
I would have a better answer if I could actually have the passage in front of my face.
Oh, would you like some time? I can dance.
I know. You can dance. Are you sure? Are you sure it's in Numbers?
Yes, I'm 100% sure. If you'd like me to, I can Google it and I can let you know the passage.
It's the test for the unfaithful woman.
The test for the unfaithful wife.
Faithful wife, right?
Right.
Because I was kind of scrolling through Numbers and I wasn't seeing it at all. Because it's one of those passages that has its own little bold heading.
It's Numbers 5:11 through 29.
Yep, I Googled it too.
I Google faster.
You do, Steve. You're so much faster at the Google than I.
It's Google foo.
Well done, Steve. There you go.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, it totally says that. I'm not fibbing.
Are you aware of what the Bible says about children, though?
It says all kinds of things about children, like when it says that God killed all of the firstborn sons in Egypt. Those were children.
Are you aware of what it says about children who died before the age of responsibility?
Oh no! What does the Bible say about that?
They go to heaven.
So why is baptism necessary as a child, or you don't believe that it is?
I don't think baptism is necessary at all as a child.
Oh, okay. You don't. Interesting. Okay.
Baptism is just a public expression of your faith, typically for when you've just converted, or maybe later in life when you're ready for it. Just the approach I took.
Sweet. So abortion's not wrong then. Obviously, abortion's probably one of the best things that you can do because that child's automatically going to go to heaven and doesn't have the risk of making any sins in his life.
The Torah defines abortion as murder, actually.
But an abortion happened by God in the Torah, and you just told me that I don't have to pay attention to the Torah because that was for an older version.
But those children are in heaven. You do get that, right?
Well, so are the children that are aborted today.
They are. But that doesn't mean abortion is
okay.
good. But the Torah specifically teaches that the civil punishment for killing or injuring an unborn child is the exact same punishment for killing or injuring an adult, which is eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life.
Okay, so in the Old Testament, child is in heaven if you abort them, but you will be punished unless you repent. And if you repent, then you too can be saved.
If an abortionist were performing an abortion in that time period, he would die for what he did.
Would he have the opportunity to repent?
No, not in that scenario, not under those laws.
Okay, but those laws aren't valid now, but now he'd have the opportunity to repent.
Those laws are still here for us to read because it tells us that God does not like people murdering children who haven't been born yet.
But God did it himself, and it was okay because they went to heaven. That's why you quoted me what the Bible said about children who are under the age.
Yeah, so I quoted that because if you believe that part at all, then it's a non-issue.
Okay, so it would be a non-issue it's a non-issue that God did it. It's okay for God to do it if the woman is thought of as cheating, right?
It's not arbitrary though.
No, because the woman cheated, and that's why she's being punished by having her baby aborted, and that's okay because the baby's going to heaven.
You do realize what the totality of the Old and New Testaments teach about us as humans, right?
No, explain it to me from your perspective, please, because you may have a different perspective of it from me.
The Old Testament clearly teaches that everybody is a criminal in the eyes of God. We've all violated his laws, and we deserve to go to hell when we commit those crimes against him. It's not a case of, oops, I dropped the soap kind of sin. It's hardcore rebellion in our flesh.
Okay.
That's why the Old Testament says that there's no one who is righteous, no one who is good. Everyone's a sinner who is unrighteous. If left to our own devices, and if Jesus hadn't come, everyone goes to hell before they're annihilated in the lake of fire at the end of all time.
So everybody who existed in time before Jesus went to hell, and they didn't have the opportunity to be saved no matter how good they led their life?
The Revelation 21, I think it is, or it's the end of 20, says that death and Hades are opened up at the end of time, and everyone is judged, and those whose names are found in the book of life get to spend eternity with God. Those who are not, they get thrown into the lake of fire, and their souls cease to exist.
Okay. So
hell is not the eternal torture chamber that a lot of people paint it as. It's just a holding cell until the final judgment. That's why it says death and Hades, it was opened up and everyone came out of it to be judged. People are just being held in hell. It's not the final destination.
So is everybody being held in hell until the final judgment, including the people who found salvation in Jesus?
It says Hades and death. There is some kind of place that believers are probably being held, especially if we're talking about Old Testament believers.
So there's a couple of different holding places?
Sure.
Okay. So then why did Jesus have to be crucified if nobody gets to go to heaven? Because didn't he promise people that they get to go to heaven if they truly believed in him?
Because if Jesus didn't come and do what he did, since he is God himself as God the Son, part of the Trinity, if Jesus didn't come, there would be no way for us to get out of what we have coming to us.
Why?
See, if God was the tyrannical monster that Richard Dawkins paints him as, then God would not give us a way to get out of the punishment we have coming for our crimes against him. He would just let us live our lives, and then after we died, we would go to hell, and then we'd go to the white throne judgment, and we would be cast into the lake of fire. No one would go and spend eternity with the Father.
Sure. Okay.
The whole point of Jesus coming is that God loves his creation enough to give us a way out of what we have coming to us, a way to get right with him. The way he got right, the way we can get right with him is Jesus' sacrifice on the cross creates a way for us to have our sin ledgers paid for.
Okay.
The way it works is that his sacrifice on the cross takes away our sin ledger if we accept it. Because New Testament teaches you have to accept the gift. People can reject it. If you accept the gift, his righteousness is credited to you, and he takes your sin ledger.
Okay.
And since he's the infinite God, he pays the price, and you get to spend eternity with the Father.
Okay, I get that. So, two questions. One, what happened to everybody? What happens to everybody before Jesus that didn't know Jesus was coming or was ever going to exist, that wasn't able to accept him at that point? And what happens to people in other parts of the earth where they've never been exposed to the idea of Jesus and haven't had the opportunity to accept him? Do they get held in a different place? Or do they never have that opportunity? And why would God create people that didn't have that opportunity?
The geographically isolated people you brought up with that other guy. I actually made a video about that.
Oh, okay. I'd be interested to see your video. Would you mind giving me a summation so that I might be able to understand better? Because there are geographically isolated people.
There's an answer to the geographically isolated people argument.
Okay.
In Luke,
tell everybody 12, what your video is called so they can go see it too, so that it's easy for them to look up.
It's one of the newer videos on my channel, so if they just go to my channel, they'll find it. But I think it's something to the effect of, "Are people who never heard of Jesus going to hell?" Question mark.
Okay. That's a good point of reference for sure.
But no, in Luke 12:47 through 48, I guess at the end of a parable, Jesus said something that addresses your question. It's relevant to your question.
Yes, please.
In Luke 12:47 through 48, which is part of the parable where Jesus is talking about the faithful and wise manager.
Okay.
He says in verses 47 and 48, "The servant who knows the master's will and does not get ready or does not do what the master wants will be beaten with many blows, but the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who is given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." Since this is a parable that it's a part of, and parables have points, the point of this passage is that you're only responsible for what you know.
Okay.
So the question then becomes, what are geographically isolated people responsible for? And that's where the New Testament also comes into play. In Romans,
the definition of what you know comes into play there too, don't you think?
I'm
I
leading
feel
into
like
that.
do you address that? That like, I mean, really the definition of what you know with certainty. I mean, I don't know with certainty that there was a Jesus in the way that the Bible presents him. And that's one of the reasons that I'm an atheist, is because I doubt and I don't have that certainty, and I can't honestly say that I know. So I don't know. So would I be covered under that as well?
I'll finish reading the passages because there's
Oh,
only
yes,
3
absolutely.
passages in the video, and I could just read them to you now.
Yeah,
In Romans 1, 18 through 20, it says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. What that passage is saying is that everyone can tell that there's a God who made everything, and that he has certain attributes just by observing the creation. And then when you skip ahead to Romans chapter 2, verses 14 and 15, you read, indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them. And what that passage is saying, that everyone through their conscience has access to the objective moral standard that God is responsible for. So the person who is geographically isolated from the rest of the world, has never heard about Jesus, the Bible, Islam, pick your religion, pick atheism even. They've heard of none of it. They're geographically isolated from the world, so they haven't heard any of this. Bible teaches that they intuitively know from observing creation that he exists and he has certain attributes, and they know through their consciences that there's an objective moral standard by which they're judging things that doesn't come from their own minds. And that's also from God. So the person who's geographically isolated from the rest of the world, in principle, in theory, based off of the scriptures and what they clearly say, if they acknowledge that there's some kind of creator God with certain attributes because of what they see in creation, and if they see that, wow, there's this objective moral standard that my conscience keeps beaming me about, and that must come from him too, because it's not coming from me. If they accept that, what they already know intuitively, and they cry out to God wanting to know him more, they can, in theory, go to heaven because they're responsible for what they know. It makes no sense to hold them responsible for Jesus and the gospel if they're never, ever, ever, ever exposed to that. And I've gotten a lot of flack from Christians for saying that in my video, but the Bible's pretty clear.
Oh, you and I both get flack from Christians. Don't worry.
And even
solidarity.
And in Numbers, actually, it's funny you brought up Numbers earlier, because in Numbers chapter 11, I think it is, we have an instance where some women come to Moses and say, hey, we know the Torah law says the inheritance goes to the son, but our father was part of this rebellion. He was killed. We have no brothers. He had no sons. So unless God gives the inheritance to us, our family will lose their the family inheritance forever. So Moses brought the case before God, and God said, what they say makes sense. They can have the inheritance until one of them has a son, and then that first son who's born to one of them, he can have the inheritance, so they can get back on track with keeping the Torah law. So in a particular case, God was very reasonable and made a reasonable accommodation that would allow them to get back on track with keeping that part of the Torah law. So if God was that reasonable in the past, it makes no sense it makes no sense for Christians today to say that he will hold people responsible for things they don't know. That's not the kind of God that we claim to follow. So why would they teach that? I don't know.
Right. Okay. That's a lot to digest. All right.
It is a lot to digest.
So I still have more questions because there's still some things don't make sense to me logically, and perhaps they do. Yeah, of course. Perhaps obviously they do for you. Like you've reconciled yourself with this logically. You seem like a smart guy. Perhaps I'm not. Maybe you don't understand why this isn't logical to me. Do you not understand why I don't understand? Is it clear to you? Perhaps this is a good way to start so that we understand each other. Is it clear to you why I might have these questions?
You think God is on our level and that he needs to be held to the same standards as everyone else.
No.
That's how it works in practice, though.
No, I think he should be consistent to himself. Is my issue. I think that if he's meant to be omniscient and omnibenevolent, obviously you don't think he's benevolent, though. You can't think he's benevolent.
He is. You acknowledge with the unfaithful woman example that the only woman who's being killed is the one who is actually unfaithful. So she's guilty of a crime against God when she does that. So for him to punish her in whatever way he sees fit, that's his prerogative.
Sure, great. Okay. I hate to interrupt you, but granting you that scenario, granting you that unfaithfulness should be punishable by death, which I don't think, given today's society, you would agree with. Would you like to start seeing adulteresses and adulterers killed in the streets? Probably not, by God or otherwise.
That was lifted in the new covenant, so no.
Oh my gracious. Okay, well, if that was lifted, then that's where he's inconsistent.
It doesn't mean
that's inconsistent because that was his law.
It doesn't mean that they don't deserve to.
Why did he change his mind if he's omniscient? Why did he change his mind?
It doesn't mean that they don't deserve to die for what they did, but the fact is the new covenant gives them a way out because God loves us enough to give us a way out.
That's the omnibenevolent part covered, okay? Then if he's omniscient, then why did he need to give them a way out? If he's omniscient, why did he need to give them a way out? He created us. He knew what we were going to be like. He made us. How did he not know what we were going to be like?
Because if he didn't give us a way out, you and I are going to die in this life and in the afterlife.
Then why did he make us like this?
Like what?
Evil, like you said in the Torah, and all condemned. Why did he make us evil and condemned?
That's the problem. He didn't. We
did. Who made us? Who made us? And who's omniscient?
Mm-hmm.
He made us. He's omniscient. If he made us and he's omniscient and omnibenevolent, he chose to make us flawed and then punished us for being so.
He gave us the ability to freely choose to follow him and love him. That's how love works. Being made into a robot, it's not love.
Then he's not omniscient because he made us knowing we wouldn't make that choice. He made us knowing we wouldn't make that choice. Otherwise, he's not omniscient. Or he made us knowing, he either made us knowing we would choose not to love him, or he's not omniscient. And if he's not omniscient, then how is he God?
I'm afraid I don't see the logic behind your objection. Because
does he not know everything that's ever going to happen?
Of course.
Then he knew what was going to happen when he made us.
But he knows what people will freely choose to do. It's not a question of forcing.
Yeah, he made us knowing what we would freely choose to do and then punished us anyway, knowing that we would make that choice. Am I wrong?
Wait, repeat that.
He made us knowing what our choices were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that we would choose to sin and that he would punish us for that. And he did it anyway, knowing what we would choose.
He's given you a way out of that, you know. Why do you reject the way? Why do you reject the way out that he's giving you?
Why did he do it and then let people suffer for thousands and thousands of years and punish them? And then why are we just discrediting that entire Old Testament as the old law? Why did he wait? Why did he wait? He knew what we were going to do from the start. Why did he wait?
Would you have preferred that God made us unable to freely choose to love him? Would you have preferred that he made us like robots?
I would have preferred that he made Adam and Eve and then Jesus the next day, so that all of those people for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, if that's the case.
How do you know that Jesus wasn't there? How do you know that Jesus wasn't there?
That Jesus wasn't there?
How do you
Oh,
know
so the
that?
crucifixion wasn't necessary then. In the New Testament doesn't matter.
But remember, God's a Trinity, and in the Old Testament, the term used in the creation account when God's talking about creating things, he uses we.
Right.
He uses a plural form. So
Sure.
Jesus claimed to be present at creation. He claimed the same name that Moses heard God give himself in Exodus chapter 3.
But nobody could be saved until he was crucified.
Incident.
So why didn't he crucify him the next day if he was there? Just so that everybody could be saved from that point on. And why did he create people that he knows every choice that we're going to make? God knows every choice that we're going to make. So he constantly makes people who are going to reject him, knowing that we're going to reject him because he made us and he knows everything that's going to happen because it's all part of his plan.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not reasonable for me to think?
Now, I will say that your brain and mine work a little differently, just for a little bit of disclosure. I have Asperger's syndrome, really high functioning, so I have a very black and white way of seeing things, and it's very hard for me to see things from other people's perspective. I can only judge by logic, reason, and what I know. And in my case, knowing the Bible is the thing I know best. And sure. I don't read anything in here that really causes me alarm because I understand that the Creator is in charge of everything. He's not accountable to us, we're accountable to him, and that's the way things are. But the atheist worldview that you have expressed, you're trying to make him accountable to yourself.
I think that you're trying to make a conflation so that you can get out of maybe addressing that this dichotomy and this particular quandary that I've presented to you is valid. Can you address without saying atheist worldview? I understand that I'm an atheist. I don't believe that I necessarily have what you might consider an atheist worldview. I think I'm just a person, and I think I'm a person like you. And as such, I have questions that I feel like logically need answers. And obviously you're a smart guy. And I mean, you've studied, like you knew passages right away, like you know your Bible, and I respect you so much for that. And you've focused on it, and you're ardent about it, and you see, and you're interesting to talk to, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. But if you could just maybe address that quandary directly instead of deflecting to what it means about my worldview or me as a person, and just address the quandary itself, I'd appreciate that, because it's something that I don't understand personally. And if you could help me understand it, maybe I could have a different perspective.
Well, the reason why I say that you're calling God to account to you is because you keep talking about him needing to be more consistent in the way he does things and applies his rules that he gives to us.
It's that's because that's not what I meant, though.
That's the line of reasoning of someone.
No, that's not what I meant, though. It's not consistent with a perception that he's omniscient. I'm not saying that he's not consistent with what I want him to be. I'm saying he's not consistent with the definition of omniscience and omnibenevolence simultaneously.
I think he is.
Okay, then how does that make sense?
I told you earlier, the fact that we even get a choice to get out of the punishment that's coming to us proves that he loves us and wants to give us mercy.
Then why? Then I'm back to why did he wait? Why did he wait? Why did he wait? Why did he wait?
I don't know exactly why he waited the way he did, because I'm not him.
Okay.
It would be a fun thing to ask him when I see him, but
okay. If you do see him, find a way to send a message to me.
I don't really care about why he waited so long, because the fact of the matter is it's historical events of the past. It's what happened. So there's no point in questioning what happened. There's only
of course, there's a point in questioning what can we learn from the
past? What can we learn from the past? How does it apply today, and how does it apply going forward? Is primarily what I'm concerned with in my day-to-day life.
But if your entire worldview is based on the Bible being literable, don't you have to at least reconcile yourself with the consistency of your understanding of God? And that's where I struggle, because if he's omniscient, And then he knows everything that's ever going to happen before it happens, and everything's predetermined. If everything is predetermined, then we can't have free will, because everything is predetermined. Every choice that we're making is part of a plan. There's an end game, right? So if he's omniscient, he knows everything that's ever going to happen. All of it is leading up to revelation, and every single step up to that point is predetermined. If every single step up to that point is predetermined, then nothing that I ever do is my choice, and that free will doesn't exist. Then if I could have a choice that could potentially derail revelation. Then I could make a choice that derails revelation.
You said he predetermines things. That's not true. He just knows what everyone's going to do of their own volition. So that way he can know what's going to happen, but he's not the one making it happen. Just because he knows each and every one of us so well, he knows what we'll freely choose to do in every situation in our lives.
So did he know that at the moment of creation for everybody that ever would exist?
Don't see why not.
If he knew at the moment of creation what would happen to everybody that was ever born, even the people that had not been born yet, he knew every choice that would ever be made by every single person that was ever going to be born up to the point of revelation, then there is no free will, because it's predetermined.
So how is knowing what someone will freely choose to do causing them to do it?
Because it all leads up to the revelation, does it not?
Well, sure, it leads up to what's going to happen, but once again, how does knowing what everyone will freely choose to do force them to do something? Just because he knows what they're going to do doesn't mean he's saying, "Hey, you got to do that, dude. You got to do that, girl. You got to do that." He's not making anyone do anything. He just knows what we'll freely choose to do, and that's why he can accurately predict what's going to happen in the future. He knows what everyone is going to freely choose to do. He doesn't make anyone do anything. He doesn't make anyone have to accept Jesus. He doesn't make anyone have to accept the biblical worldview.
So he knowingly creates people that are going to do horrible things, then, would be the counter side to that. He would knowingly, he knew at the point that he created Adam and Eve in the world, everything that was going to happen up to the point of revelation, including everybody that was ever going to exist. So he knew that there was going to be murderers. He knew that there was going to be rapists. And he knew that there were going to be pedophiles. And he did it anyway.
And they're all going to get theirs when they're held to account. If they
and what do their victims get? And what do their victims get in this life? But it's okay for them to suffer in this finite life that they have?
Biblical worldview makes it clear that this life is not all that there is.
Okay, so
that's why
them suffering now is okay?
No, but those who make them suffer and who are unrepentant about it will be held to account.
So is God indifferent to worldly suffering? Because he's going to give us... Then why did he allow it to happen if he's not indifferent?
Because it would infringe on people's free will. You don't want God in your life telling you what to do in your everyday decisions, do you?
No, well, I don't believe he exists, but no.
But if he did, would you want to? Would you want him to?
No, of course not. Of course not.
Then it just makes my point. I mean, that's why he doesn't step in, because it would infringe on people's wills like yourself. You don't want him, even if you grant that he exists according to how you understand the world. Sure. Even if you grant that he exists, you don't want him in your life.
Right. So he knew that all of this was going to be chaos, though. He knew that it was all going to be chaos and insanity, and we would reject him from go. Right? He knew.
I wasn't clear exactly how long it took Adam and Eve to have the fall, but.
Well, he would have known. He would have known before he even created them. No matter how long it took for them to take a bite from the tree of knowledge, because he's God. So he would have known from the very moment they were created that they were going to do it. So he created perfect people and was like, "Here's a tree. Don't eat from that tree. I know you're going to. I'm going to tell you not to, but I know you're gonna."
You know there were two trees. You know there were two trees, right? You know there were two trees, right?
Okay, I'm not sure how that's relevant, but
there were two. One tree was the knowledge of good and evil, the one they weren't supposed to eat from, and then the other tree was the tree of life. So really, they had the choice from the beginning. You can choose to live with me,
but he knew what they were going to choose,
and have right relationship, or you cannot.
But he knew what they were going to choose. Yeah. He knew what they were going to choose. right? He created them. He created the very first two people.
Don't you want free
and
will
said,
in your
"There's
life?
2 trees. Don't pick this one." And he created people knowing they would choose this one.
Well,
and all of
Satan
us are condemned.
Satan had a hand in that, but yeah.
So he can't control Satan's power over us. He can't control Satan, because if he can't control Satan, then how is he God? How is he omnibenevolent, omniscient, and all powerful if he has no control over one component of our lives?
God does to Satan what he does to all of us. He allows him to do what he wants to do.
Yeah, but when he created him, he already knew every choice he was ever
going to. And when the time comes, Satan will be held to account just like we are, except his punishment will be worse.
Yeah, but he already knew every choice Satan was going to make, so that he knew that Satan was going to convince Eve to eat from the tree, and he made Eve and Satan anyway, knowing that he was creating that very scenario.
I'm surprised you included Eve in that discussion.
Oh, sorry, what?
I'm surprised you included Eve in that answer.
Why wouldn't I have included Eve in that answer?
Because, I don't know. Well, I gotta be honest, watching your videos in the past, I assumed that you were more in line with a feminist ideology of empowering women. So to include Eve in that answer would kind of take away some of her empowerment as the first woman.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't believe she existed, to be fair.
But there was a
that
first...
You think that I'm interested you think that I'm a feminist. And like, when I say feminist, I mean more so like a third wave feminist.
I said as empowering women. That's not necessarily like the crazy liberal feminists. That means,
okay, yeah, I'm not one of those.
Yeah.
I believe in equality. Absolutely.
Same here.
I believe in equality of opportunity, for sure. Mm-hmm. Between men and women.
Anyway.
Interesting. That's funny to me. They had that perspective of me.
Not as a liberal one, though. As just a general, empower women kind of thing.
Yeah, empower women. Empower everybody, though. I don't think that it should be, if you believe in equality, I don't think it should be just women that you're empowering. I think it should be all people, because women are included in all people. And that's the point of equality. But okay, fair enough. All right, Justin. Why don't you ask me some questions? Justin, we've been at this for a little over an hour now. Is there anything that you'd like to ask me? I feel like we've been bandying about the Bible for a little while now. And I feel like there's a chance that I might be frustrating you a little bit. And I have that effect on people from time to time. I will confess.
Well, there is something I did want to tell you, but I kind of had to wait till now.
Okay, please.
Are you familiar with the movie Dirty Harry?
I know that it's a Clint Eastwood movie, and I think he was a cop in it, and that's about all I know.
One of the most popular lines of that movie is from Dirty Harry's mouth, Clint Eastwood's mouth. A man has to know his limitations. I know for myself that even though I have kind of a logical, reason-oriented, kind of black and white worldview, I know that I have certain limits to my knowledge base. I know that I'm not very good at thinking quickly and having a whole bunch of answers, at the moment, ready to go on every issue that comes up. So I typically don't engage in too many of these kinds of podcasts or debates because it's just not the kind of person I am at this point in history.
Totally fair.
Doing videos where I have time to write down stuff, make slides, and take my time at putting things together. That's the way I can operate. But I have serious knowledge limits, as I think a lot of people would admit. And a lot of people seem to think that I'm very arrogant, condescending, and a bit of a know-it-all in my videos. But I have serious limits that I've never denied having. And so a lot of the times in our conversation just now where I really didn't have an answer, there's a lot of tripping of the wires, crossing over and getting tumbled in my brain. It's kind of like the frustration of having all of your gaming cords and power strips and whatnot get all tangled together when you try and move them at once.
Okay.
So I will definitely look back at some of the things you brought up and look more into them on my own, and probably make some videos about them. Just so.
Yes, please do. I'll watch them. I'm subscribed to your channel, and I'll interact on your comments section. That's totally fair, Justin. That's absolutely fair. Totally okay. Totally okay. I respect you for doing this. I thank you so much, and I know that there's a chance that it may have been difficult for you, and I thank you for overcoming that. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And I hope that you feel comfortable with the conversation, and that you feel that I was respectful to you. And if there's in any way that I wasn't, or you felt uncomfortable, if you're not comfortable letting me know here right now, that's okay. You can message me and let me know, and I'll try to reconcile that with you. Okay.
Yeah. Well, there's been no discomfort. Like what I was saying before. If I gave any impression of discomfort, it's because of what was going on in here. Like, where is that thing I think I know?
That happened.
I don't.
Totally happened.
No, you're. I can say it here now in front of your audience that you're fine. The way you've behaved is good. So.
Oh well, thank you.
I did have another question though, because I'm kind of curious about how you met Paulogia.
I try not to talk about him anymore, Justin. Okay, so
since we're wrapping up, do it, Shannon. Do it.
It's not an apologetics thing, so it shouldn't be too bad unless you don't.
No, it's public information. I met him actually on the Great Debate Community. I was a fan of his channel, and he was on the Great Debate Community. It was before he was actually going to go to the Creation Museum, and Steve, who is hosting this interaction for us, actually had him on and opened it up to audience members to come in. And I came in because I had a question for him, and we became friends. He and I started interacting, and it developed from there. So we actually met on this channel, if you can believe that.
I made a love connection.
You did. That's the only good thing Steve's ever done.
The only thing on my channel. Years from now, the only thing my channel will remember for is that. That's it.
Yeah, Shannon Q and Paulogia got together on this channel.
You're welcome, Steve.
Yeah, Paulogia and I rearranged that. That was all planned, right? That was all pre-planned. We had years of planning on that.
Yeah. You guys were both stalking me on Twitter.
Totally accidental. But I guess we're going to wrap this up. So I want to thank you guys. Justin, this actually was a good conversation. I will give you props. You handled yourself quite respectfully and quite well on this. So huge props to you. I think even the live chat was actually noticing that. So thank you. Shannon, very impressed as usual. That was a great conversation. We do have an after show, which will be on the Great Debate Community channel, the community channel we call it. The link to that is in the video description, and it will be on the Discord, the Great Debate Community Discord. Anyone can join it. It is streamed live onto that channel. Bullinator will be running that. Takes about 10 minutes to set up or so after we go off air. So if you want to be a part of that, jump on in. I know we have somebody else in here named Michael. Mike, let me show him real quick, because poor guy's been here the whole time unbroadcasted. You want to say something real quick, Michael?
Hi, Mike. Mike's been. Oh, you're muted, Mike. We can't hear you.
Oh, he has
no mic. He has no mic. We're saying hi on behalf of Mike.
He's one of my fans.
Okay, fair enough. Well, he has no mic, so maybe later on we can get in discussion with him, because he's also young with Creationist. So Justin and Shannon, if you want to actually join the after show, that's fine. If you want to listen, that's fine. If you have other things to do, that's good as well. So anyways, I want to thank everybody for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, subscribe to the Great Debate Community channel, and to the Non-Sequitur channel,
and to Justin's channel.
And Justin's channel and Shannon's channel.
Not mine. Not mine, because if I hit 1,000,
he needs
I'm going to have to make a video.
Listen,
she has told her to make a video.
She told everybody at 500 subs she'd make a video, and she lied about that. Liar, pants on fire. No, she just
1,000. I'm fully committed. That's what
she changed. She migrated to 1K. That's fine. So at 1K, she has to make a video. We have no idea what it's going to be about, but she'll be the only channel to make it to 1,000 subs in history, I think, that has no content. So that'll be a first.
Sorry.
So their links to subscribe to their channels is in the video description as well. I already took care of that. And thank you guys for joining. This was a great discussion, and I know everybody enjoyed this. So thank you guys, and good night.